Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the assertion by the mainstream media that there are still lots of twists and turns to come before the general election and that we should not count our chickens before they're hatched. But are they really informing people about opportunities that the Tories still have, or are they just trying to generate interest for the clicks? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So for a long time now, I've been saying that Labour's lead is not soft and that I'm relaxed about the certainty of them forming a majority government after the next election. The real contest now is not changing the government, but can we obliterate the Conservatives completely? But most of the mainstream media don't want that to be the national discussion because they support the Conservatives. But they need to generate interest, don't they? Now, I'm fascinated by politics. I find interest in the daily to and fro. Many of you do as well. You're watching political commentary. But most people aren't. Most voters aren't. Talk of a sure thing doesn't get the clicks like talk of, oh, it could be a hung parliament. So the media are incentivised to publish not what is likely, but what is most attractive to readers. However, just because the mainstream media are incentivised to talk up the Tories' chances simply to have something interesting to write about doesn't mean there might not be kernels of truth within their musings. Now, being clear, although there are some things which can help the Tories out, which I will discuss, they are so far behind that it will not affect the binary outcome of who forms the government. Not going to be a hung parliament. It's the sheer scale of defeat for Sunak that is still in the balance. Right now, we can credibly talk about the Conservatives being beaten into third place, or even worse. But they could also win 200 seats and end up with the same level of beating Labour had in 2019, which is a terrible loss, but not as bad as in 1997 for the Tories, and from which they can easily rebuild for the following election. So it's true to say there remains a huge level of uncertainty for the long term. And before I discuss an article written by John Rento of the Independent, who I have to say is talking absolute rubbish, let me go over the ways in which things might not be as bad for the Tories as the polls would currently have you believe. So first of all, if they hold the general election in October, there are fears that have been expressed in the Observer today that university students, very few of whom will be voting Conservative, could be disenfranchised. The reason is that if the election is held in October, students will have only just gone to university. They may not have time to register. Now, this is a concern, of course. However, from the point of view of impacting the general election results, not huge. University students may choose where they register, at home or at their university accommodation. Now, as most students will spend term time in cities, which tend to be fairly safe non-Tory seats, the main threat to the Tories are the students who register to vote at home. And students doing that can do so without worrying about when the election is. In fact, my advice to university students, or those who may be going to university after summer, would be to register where you can for now, which is probably at home. And if you trust someone who will be there no matter what, when the election is, register to give them a proxy vote on your behalf. Or if you don't trust anyone, register for postal voting, because with postal voting, all you need to do is be able to get that ballot. You just have to make a visit home to pick up your ballot paper when it arrives, and you'll have a couple of weeks to do that. An autumn election does potentially screw a lot of university students over, absolutely. But then, for the same reason, so could a May or a June, because that tends to be the time when people are finishing their exams and going home anyway. And if they've registered at the university digs, it's like, then you've got the same problem, right? Another factor is Nigel Farage. Now, right now, the polls are based on the notion that Nigel Farage is not taking a frontline position in the election, and they are still dire for the Tories. But if Farage did get more directly involved, it would make things worse for Sunak. Not as badly as some commentators are trying to claim. There's some suggesting, we've got polling that shows Nigel Farage would add 7 points to Reform UK's vote share. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. But Farage leading Reform UK would certainly give them a boost at a cost to the Tories. But I believe that Farage will be in America this autumn, grifting on the Orange One's presidential campaign circuit. There'll be the odd little video message sent back home, but he's going to be in America. So if the Tories do hold the election in October, they reduce their chance of total wipeout by taking Farage out of the picture. Then there's the inaccuracies inherent in the current polling because boundary changes add uncertainty. However, the picture looks dire even when you do MRP calculations based on the old boundaries as well. Then there's voter ID. There are fears that a lot of voters could be turned away because they still don't know they need voter ID, or if they are aware, they may think they have it. They're not aware that only certain types are permissible. Oh, well, I've got ID, that's fine. Yeah, that's not counting. Just as with university students, it will be important to talk to as many potential voters as you know to make them aware of the requirements. If they don't have acceptable ID, and what is acceptable varies by where you live and how old you are, so watch out, then either get it or register for postal voting to bypass that requirement. What we need is a really effective campaign to inform people of the new requirements, because if we fail to make people aware, there are fears that up to 2 million voters could have their votes basically stolen. But there will be a lot of political groups, partisan and non-partisan, in whose interest it is to make those people aware. The Conservative government will not be putting in any special effort to inform people, but I think other political parties will, because most other political parties benefit from people being made aware. So you take all these things together, screwing over university students, those who are not in the habit of carrying around a driving licence with them, waiting until Farage is out of the country before calling the election. And, you know, there are things that could be said to be boons for the Conservatives which could help them avoid wipeout. But it's not enough to get them into hung parliament territory or anywhere close. And also, this is not even considering all the things that are going to make matters worse for the Conservatives over the next few months. There is still cost of living crisis impacts being felt by more people. But anyway, what's not going to help them is the piss poor collection of arguments in this independent article. Let's go over the main ones. First Rental says that Starmer is bound to slip up and Sunak is bound to do something that finds favour with the public. What utter crap. Starmer has already slipped up multiple times in the last half a year, including very recently. It hasn't even dented either his or Labour's poll rating. This notion that Starmer has been getting everything just perfectly right for the last few years, but he'll have a little bit of a wobble in the next 6 months, is madness. He hasn't been getting everything right. Also, Sunak is hopeless. He's not been unlucky in seeing his reputation dragged down into the mud by his party. He's been idiotically responsible. Second, he talks about Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, telling an increasingly positive story about the economy. Now, Andrew Bailey is under huge pressure from Tory MPs who want him sacked. Of course, he's talking up the economy. Independent economists, however, are saying, although, yes, there are positive signs, ordinary people aren't going to feel the effects of them. A lot of people are going to be worse off. And even the ones, because living standards collapsed so quickly that it was noticed, even those who are going to be a bit better off this October than they were in January, will still remember they're worse off than they were a couple of years ago. So although, yes, you'll be able to point at a graph and go, oh, that's a better economic sign, people will not feel it. Third, he tries to claim that there are pro-Labour pollsters. No, there aren't. In fact, one of the top two pollsters, and the one that most unkind to the Tories, was founded by an actual Conservative MP. You know, pollsters are not like the media. Yes, they get things wrong, but they are not politically motivated. Their methodology, for a start, is published and scrutinised by independent analysts. Seriously, this is a level of cope I've not seen from journalists before. Fourth, Rental tries to claim that although Labour are on for a massive majority if you use MRP, it's much smaller if you use Uniform National Swing. Yeah, that's because Uniform National Swing is useless. It's a bit like saying, well, yeah, if you jump off that cliff, you'll probably break every bone in your body. But if you levitate down, you'll probably be fine. Leaning on Uniform National Swing is basically believing in magic. He says Uniform Swing has been a better guide in the past. No, it hasn't. It has no credible basis at all. It fails to take account of the fact that political parties don't just campaign nationally, throw out a load of policies and hope for the best. The ones who are working well target certain types of voter, which naturally produces greater swings in seats where there are lots of those voters, and smaller swings, maybe even negative swings, in seats with fewer of those voters. It's utterly barking. Finally, he rabbits on about what might happen if the poll lead went down to 9 points. Yes, absolutely. If the poll lead went down that low, then public perceptions would massively change. And then, you add in the voter ID suppression, screwing over students. Lots of things could indeed change. Absolutely. But the poll lead has been about 20 points for a year and a half now. what on earth makes anyone think that getting it down to 9 in the next 6 months is remotely plausible? I also like how he used the phrase, by my calculations, as if this bonehead has ever calculated anything in his life. So yes, there are things which can make a bit of a nonsense of the polls. People unaware of voter ID or university students saying they will vote a particular way in the polls will throw the results out if it ends up that they can't vote. Like if you've got polling based on people's voting intentions, and then those people who do intend to vote find that they can't, yes, you're going to throw those poll results out a bit. Boundary changes also makes polling more difficult because you're basing it on presumed past results rather than the real ones. But the gap in the polls is so huge. And I don't just mean, the gap you see in the actual voting intention polls. I mean, under the bonnet, what people think about the different parties and personalities on individual policy areas. The gap is so massive that, as I said at the start, and I'll maintain, unless the evidence genuinely changes, what this election is about is not who forms the government after the election or how strong that government is. Because, you would think it makes a huge difference to Labour whether they get a majority of 60 or 260. It doesn't. 60 is enough for them. 60 makes them a strong government. They can get things through. The contest is about reducing the Tories to the point where they struggle to be a political force ever again. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.